Hello everyone, good to be with you on this bright and early morning. I had planned to do a Frontier stream today, but I realized that I'm about a week overdue on my backup. I try to back it up every month, beyond just committing to the SVN server and regular backups. I create a separate backup, and it's about a week late on that, so I got that started. That's happening now, and that usually takes about 4 hours because I'm backing it up to a drive that isn't very fast. So I'm going to work on Ironsong Forge today. This is our latest alpha wave game. Smaller game, virtual reality focused, very, very limited scope as compared to Frontiers, you know the drill. And this is our main area. I'm not going to be working in VR today. I'm going to be doing something a little more boring. I'm going to be wrapping up some tools that I'm working on for Ryan to use for scripting. But this is the general layout of the game. Most of it happens in this one room, and you can see various stations here. I'll just really quickly recap what the game's about, so you're not totally lost. You're a blacksmith. You're a retired soldier turned blacksmith, and you live in this forge, which is really isolated. It's on the top of a cliff, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And your buddies are sending you. Let me turn on the lights here. Hold on. There we go. Your friends out in the battlefield are sending you requests for swords in the form of letters and blueprints. So you've got a blueprint station here where you can, approve the design. You've got a ledger station here where you sort of, gather your materials, get ready for forging. Then you got your forging. This is where the magic happens. You hammer out your sword with a hammer. And this is all done with touch controls. We're developing for Oculus Touch and for the Vive. And PlayStation. The dev kit should be here today, finally. So that should be fun. So yeah, you hammer out your sword here. Then here you got your grindstone. You grind on the edges. That's the bit we're working on right now, is finding a nice smooth way to sort of perform this action up against the grindstone without relying on physics, because the physics can get janky. And so yeah, you grind down the edges and the fuller if there's a fuller, and then here you got your assembly table, which is where you put the rest together. And everything you're looking at here is all temp. This is all the total prototype mode. You can see the sort of Tron grid here where we're just cobbling together this structure, and that's to keep it nice and loose. We're constantly making changes to the arrangement of things, where stations are placed. And then in the middle, and this is relevant to what we're doing today, you've got this map. And this map is sort of your bird's eye view of what's going on in the outside world. You don't participate directly in battles. You can't. Like I said, you're a retired soldier, you're wounded, you can't do anything. But you're receiving a constant stream of information from the front, and you sort of, you keep this thing up to date. And every night you dream. When you're done with the swords, you're ready to go to sleep, you're ready to sell them for money or send them off to your friends. You go to bed, and you have a dream, which just takes place in sort of a vast empty space where the table becomes much, much larger. This is about up to your knees, maybe a little past your knees. And you see the troop movements from the day before play out and sort of in real time. You see the troops moving toward each other. And if one of the troops possesses one of your swords, then that's reflected, and you sort of get to see the effect that your swords are having on the battlefield. Nothing too complex. We debated having individual units be animated and stuff like that, but we decided that what's ultimately important is that you just see the result of your work. You get to sort of experience like a tangible result from all the hard work you put into your sword, and all that you really need for that are the broad strokes. Here's the hero that requested the sword. Here's an enemy division. They meet, they clash, one or the other wins. So what I've been working on is a set of tools for Ryan, our writer, to set up these battles, because there will be quite a few, and we're not hard coding them or anything, obviously. So he needs a way to be able to specify what happens every night during the dream, and that's what I'm working on today, is getting those tools ready. And he just sent me a temporary layout for the terrain. The terrain that you were seeing on the map table is temporary. It's just tiling texture and a little bit of height variation. But Ryan has some specific ideas for how he wants this country or whatever to be laid out. So today, where the heck did I put it? The first thing I'm going to do is map overlay. There it is. I'm going to sort of automate this system where this map overlay texture that he's created will be loaded automatically and placed underneath these little battlefield schematics so that he can see where troops are supposed to move and what they're supposed to move around and things like that. Each one of these is a battle. There's only 2 so far right now, but each one of these is a battle. You can specify, what heroes and villains appear in the battlefield, and then you can specify the path of a hero. And again, everything I'm showing you is temporary. Like we're just working out the tools right now, and I'm going to hand this over to Ryan, and then he will figure out, what happens from day to day. The overall story is roughly linear. It doesn't change a whole lot. The enemy advances from one end of the map to the other, and you're constantly fighting them back. What does change is your heroes, the friends that you're in communication with, they can live or die. And that obviously has an effect on the outcome at the end, whether or not your swords are able to vanquish this enemy. But for the most part, it's a pretty linear path. So, we're not going to have like 10 different branches with different battles going down each branch. No, it's gonna be basically one set of battles, and the state of the battlefield changes a little bit depending on who's living and who's dying. So I've got a custom inspector here, battle display editor. I'm back using monodevelop, by the way, because battle display. My Visual Studio, my full Visual Studio trial expired. So I need to download the student version or whatever, get that going again, but haven't had a chance. So now I'm stuck in monodevelop again. Okay. So we've got 2 different things going on here. First, we've got our inspector, a custom inspector for the battlefield editor. And I love custom inspectors, by the way. They're great. I love being able to, you can hammer this stuff out so quick with this frankly ugly and gross interface system they have. It's hideous. I would never use it for, anything that's supposed to be like aesthetically pleasing, but for just hammering out editors really, really quick, it's fantastic. I was able to do most of this in the space of 2 or 3 hours. So we've got the custom inspector, we've got the handles, which is something I don't mess a lot with, but in this case, I made some custom handles so you could edit this spline, so you could select these objects, etc. And then we've got the gizmos. The gizmos are defined in the original script, not in the custom inspector. And this is where I draw all these shapes. We've got several different things. We've got a shape for each hero. They sort of look like little people with a division behind them. We've got shapes for each city, and then this isn't all the cities. Again, totally temp. We've got shapes for obstacles like mountains and trees. That will obviously change once I bring in this overlay. And then we've got the overall shape of the map. So when I draw the battlefield base, this is where I'm going to load our texture. All right. So if our terrain texture transform is null, we're going to create a new one. We're going to add a mesh filter. We're going to set it to a quad. Where do I get the quad from? Something to do with primitive type. I can't remember how I get I'm gonna have to look this up. Game object create primitive. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. Perfect. We don't need to do the mesh filter anymore. We're going to change the local scale to 1:2 because that's the dimensions of the board. Then we're going to load what the heck is this thing called? Map overlay. we're going to get the mesh renderer, which should just have a default texture. Okay, so then that should be created. And we're going to move it into position. The map is actually drawn in 2 dimensions. Everything that happens on the map happens in 2 dimensions, so that's why I'm having to convert this into vector 3s here. Okay, so that should do the trick. Let's see what happens next. Instantiating material, blah 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 during edit mode. Yeah, I mean, I guess that matters. Oh, well, look at that. Gotta rotate it. And what's more, it's not looking like I scaled the wrong dimension because it needs to be rotated. Okay. I'm going to move that down here so it happens every frame. 1F, 2F, 1F. Okay. And it's looking like I'm going to need to apply an offset because it's set to the center of the quad. Okay, good. Alright, I'm going to do something else here because I noticed it was instantiating multiple copies of it. We're going to name this thing map overlay terrain texture. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to search for that object. Okay, goodbye. There we are. Okay, now we're getting some ugly Z fighting. We're going to move that down just a tad. And to make it stop complaining, about instantiating these textures, we're just going to instantiate it the first time. Okay. There we go. I don't know what's going on there. Oh, I made a mistake. I'm drawing on the wrong case. When the battlefield's selected, it goes into sort of transparent mode, makes it easier to see. And when it's not selected, it goes into the sort of opaque mode, so it's easier to click on. And I put it in the wrong thing. Okay. If not solid, that's when we want it. And I only want one of these. I don't want to instantiate, 30 odd, however many battles there's going to be. Okay, good. So we're not creating a whole bunch of these. Good. That should make Ryan happy. Now, the next thing to do for him will be to go through and change where all of these appear so that they line up with this texture that he's created. You can see he's marked down cities and things. So I'll have to move it around, and these gray circles are supposed to indicate mountain ranges. Green circles are supposed to indicate forests. He's obviously got that mapped out, so he'll have to set those up. But once he's got all that, he can start moving these heroes. Oh, well, that's frustrating. I'm selecting the plane instead of the gizmo. Hadn't anticipated that. I'm going to move it down a little bit more. See if that helps. I mean, I can still select these handles, so I guess it's not nothing. All right, whatever. That's what the handles are there for. Okay, yeah, so he'd have to move these guys out of the way of this mountain range. And then so the way this works is we've got a normalized time from 0 to 1, and this shows how the battle will play out over time. And when you're actually in the dream, it'll be pretty slow. It'll be something like that. And each hero can have a different movement curve that determines how quickly they move. It's not quite like an animation system. It's not that sophisticated, but it's enough to get the basics done. All right, and then here I can show you real quick. On this final map, you see it loads the data and then it plays it out with these, and these are all temporary, but it plays it out with these little icons that get dynamically generated. So, at the end of the day, you can watch them clash and so on and so forth, and heroes will fall, enemies will conquer, cities will be sacked, and so on and so on. Should be pretty intense. Now, I'm trying to remember if there's anything else. We have this whole campaign editor. And I'm trying to remember if there's anything else I need to take care of in here. I'm trying to wrap up this tool stuff so that I can get back to working on the grindstone. That's our next priority. We had last night a discussion about units attacking each other. We wanted to be able to demonstrate that units, were actually clashing, so that you understood the relationship that your sword bears to the outcome of the battle. We needed to be able to say, okay, this enemy is attacking this hero, and then like these two become linked in that moment, and then here is the result of the battle based on how your sword turned out. And I got most of that done last night, although I'm seeing errors here. This is interesting. Yeah, so you add a battle order, and you indicate who you want a unit to attack and when. And it doesn't necessarily do anything. Like, this is not automated. They don't suddenly veer off and attack them. We still have to set all that up manually, but it gives us a system that basically it shows us who is related to whom and what sort of animation and effects and stuff should we be playing. We can specify when exactly this attack is supposed to take place in the normalized time. So if you wanted to have it like after 0.8, there the attack is taking place, and we can start playing like an animation, and presumably these two will be right next to each other when that happens, so that this makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't attack someone who's like 5 miles away or whatever, but boom, attacking, and then we can play like a sound or something. We haven't figured out exactly how we're gonna represent this, but that at least sets up the relationship. That I finished last night. I'm seeing an error here. I think it's because the target name here can be null for a few frames before that kicks in. So I'll fix that real quick. And then I think that's everything Ryan needs to set up these battles, I think. At least for now. Oh, I know what I needed to do. Okay, I need to be able to put a sword in the hero's hand, and I discussed this with Ryan, and we decided we were going to try and automate that. In the game, you have letters, and the letters are sent by these heroes, and they can have a blueprint attached, which is a request for a sword. And that blueprint is associated with a mission, and from all this information, it's possible to determine which heroes should have a sword or not, as opposed to specifying it manually in the battle layout. And we talked about doing it manually, and we decided that that wouldn't be a good idea, because it would be totally possible to get it wrong, to have the wrong hero have the wrong sword, especially if we're mixing up when the blueprints and the missions and letters are delivered. So what I need to do is I need to make the editor smart enough to figure out which heroes are supposed to have swords based on the missions and letters, etc., and then put the sword in their hand if they have one. All right, first I'm going to add a little has sword thing to our hero gizmo. Draw it at the very the way colors are managed in the gizmo and the custom inspector and handle system is one of those things that's incredibly ugly, but which strangely enough seems to work. You just specify a global color for everything that gets drawn from that point forward. So you're constantly changing the color. You can see here, for clarity, like each hero has a color. And so at the top of the draw function, I say, okay, make every gizmo I draw from now until the next time I specify the color, this color, and then that's how it works. But you end up with all these little kludgy things when you want to draw something in a different color in the middle of all of it. I'm going to make swords white. And it doesn't have to look like a sword or whatever, just a little square will suffice. And we'll make it a wire cube. Those tend to pop a little bit more. All right, and for now we're just going to say all heroes have swords so we can see what it looks like. Whoa, it's a little bit high. All of this stuff is obviously temporary. Like gizmos don't show up in the game. This is all strictly for testing purposes. Yeah, okay. I mean, that's pretty clear that something's going on. It's pretty clear that the hero has something special. I know a lot of developers who would be totally comfortable working just with numbers and stuff, and they'd be able to keep it all in their head. But for me and for Ryan as well, representing something visually is really important. We need to be able to see when we're looking at this stuff, okay, this person has this property, has this relationship to this, etc. We'll see now that, well, oh, I didn't set it back to the, here we go. I have to set it back to the hero's color after I set it to white, or we'll lose the color on this battle path that I draw. Okay. All right, so that's what it'll look like when they have a sword. Now we need to determine whether they have a sword, and I'm not going to determine that information on the fly at runtime. I'm going to store it. This is a battle unit. We call them battle maneuvers in here for clarity. A unit is just basically saying, here's something on the battlefield. You know, it can be a hero, a generic good unit, a villain, or a generic evil unit. If it's a hero, we specify which hero. If it's a villain, which villain, etc. And then we specify that the path is a spline. So, and it has orders. So in here is where I'm going to define whether this battle unit has a sword. If it's a villain, etc., we just won't pay attention to this variable. But if the sword state is not set to none, and a sword state can be none, not delivered, inadequate, adequate, exemplary, perfect. If it's not set to none, we'll know that they have a sword. And then at runtime, when we're actually playing the game, we won't have to do all this fancy, linking up, trying to figure out if the hero is supposed to have a sword. We'll already know because it'll have been set in the editor. Now, if they have a sword, we're going to need to know which mission it's from so that we can look up. Is that going to work? I want to look up as little of this at runtime as possible. But I'm realizing that in the editor, we won't know what the sword state is because that's supplied by the player. Okay, so in the editor, all we will know, all we can store is the name of the mission that's associated with this battle. And then at runtime, we're going to have to look at the mission and see what the state of the sword is. Okay. And if the sword mission name is set to string empty, or if it's not a hero unit, we'll just ignore it. Okay, that's how we're going to do it. All right. Okay, here's our maneuvers. Draw unit type. All right, so in here, we're going to add well, first, we're going to add a little indicator to show that their mission is not set to nothing. So we've got the type, blah, blah, blah. This should really come at the very start because this is the most important thing. Okay. The sword mission name is not null or empty. Oh, and this should only happen if this is a hero. Okay. So again, I'm not trying to link up the mission yet. I'm just drawing a little thing that lets me know if this character is supposed to have a sword at this point. So I'll go in here into debug mode and change this manually. Wait, that's the orders we want. No sword available, no sword available. Oh, that's a villain. See, this is why the custom editors are so important. If I was having to deal with these lists, you know, like going through like this, trying to edit stuff, it would be a nightmare. It'd be impossible to keep straight. Okay, sword for mission blah. All right. Kasim has no sword. Terra has a sword for mission blah. And then at that point, both in the editor and at runtime, we will look up the state of that sword. But first, this is where we go through every battle unit in order. And if the alignment is a hero, this is where I can do some extra work. Even if we're not showing the editor, even if we're not showing that particular character's like details editor, I can do a little searching and figure out if they're supposed to have a sword. So I gotta get the relationship clear in my head here. So the way that the relationship requires a couple different jumps. It's pretty clear, but it requires a couple jumps. A mission is delivered by means of a letter. The letter has a sender. So for every letter, if the person who sent that letter is the name of this battle unit, one of the reasons why I don't want to do this constantly, like this whole search constantly in real time at runtime, is because it's super inefficient. But in the editor, it doesn't matter. You know, we're not running complicated graphics here. We're not, you know, it doesn't matter if we gobble up a bunch of clock cycles on a pointless search. And the results of the search, we're going to dump like part of the results into this battle unit data, and that'll save us the trouble at runtime. Okay, if if the letter name, if the letter that kicks off this mission is the same as the letter that this person sent, then we know that that mission was sent by this person. If this was like a hair more complicated, it would almost be worth it to set up some sort of relational database. But thankfully, these are like really the only, there's only this couple of things. There's not also like inventory items and this and that and Well, it's just letters, mission, swords, and then the time that they're delivered. Okay. And I believe, I need to confirm this with Ryan, but I believe that each character can only send you one mission. So that might make this even simpler, but anyway. Okay. I want to break out of both of these. Okay, so that should set the sword mission name.